I guess you can actually call this band LOKI, because, geez, they are low-key terrible. Now, have you ever asked yourself what Metallica's Garage Inc. would sound like if it was performed by the daddiest of garage dad rock bands? Well, I'm glad you asked. Hi people, and hello my Chili con carne crew, it's Chili here, the man who produces Design for My Eyes, doing a 5-minute review on Thor's newest album, Rock the Universe. You know, I always wondered what it would be like to get a copy of Garage Inc. through Temu. In fact, I get asked this question twice a week by my intrusive thoughts in my head. And then, as if the universe were just listening to my mind, the sky parted its cheeks down upon me only to produce a thunderous rumbling, as Thor shot out of the sky to greet me on a cold winter's day. Except it's not Chris Hemsworth staring back at me with his big beautiful blue eyes, but instead a former bodybuilder who sounds like deadpan Iggy Pop. It's John Mickle and his latest offering. So, just like a cold winter morning, it's time to make this bathroom trip quick, unless I want to find out what an Alaskan pipeline means on Urban Dictionary. Yeah, 2 guesses how this review is going down. Now, for those who are unaware, I have previously reviewed Thor's 2024 record, Ride of the Iron Horse. However, in all honesty, I wish I didn't, because I would go on to say that this was the worst album I've ever heard. However, that album kind of is a bunch of B-sides and outtakes, so I guess you can take that with a grain of salt. Surely this album will fare better because it's a bunch of covers, right? I mean, I can hear you asking it through the screen, but to that I say, didn't you hear the intro? Thor's vocals on this album are stunted, which seems like a dangerous verb to use in the realm of bodybuilding, but there is no hiding it. The guy has no range or power, and if it wasn't for his stifled and limited spectrum, he would sound like dozens of others in this field, I'm guessing. Then you have the balls to throw Deep Purple's Highway Star into the mix and proceed to sing it like he was in front of one of those pitch-sensing karaoke machines, except clearly the machine itself is f***ing tone deaf. It's one thing to try and make a cover your own and perform it in your style, but it's another to take an already existing and legendary piece and proceed to do to it what Kissinger did to the Vietnam peace talks. Ian Gillan is a spectacular vocalist, so instead of harping on just how shitty this cover is, I'm going to let the vocals play out and do the talking for me. Nobody gonna take my car, I'm gonna race it to the ground. Nobody's gonna beat my car, I'm gonna break the speed of sound. Just what were you smoking when you decided to tackle this cover? Because might I suggest not doing anything like this again, as in ever. For the sake of everyone who enjoys good music, do not listen to this cover. Love me 2 times, I'm going away. Another cover that you can find on the album is the Doors song Love Me 2 Times, another unlikely suitor, but then again, don't let that high bar stop you from trying. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the best tracks by the Doors, along with Roadhouse Blues and of course Riders of the Storm. In fact, I have to thank the gods that they didn't perform a half-baked version of Riders of the Storm in their style, as the only acceptable cover song that I know exists is Snoop Dogg's version, in which case half-baked is not the description I would label the musician of course to be. Instead, Thor managed to take this jaunty and short piece that was Love Me 2 Times and makes it feel stiff in its composition, losing the original's appeal and intent. Come on, this song is about getting your f*** on, delivered by a sex icon with his infectious cadence and slightly loose delivery. Not something to be played in strictly 4/4 timing like the only page in your Kama Sutra book was missionary position. Something tells me post-bodybuilding dad bod Thor will not be taking down the legacy of the Doors anytime soon, but it is another subpar cover, and this is a recurring theme on the album. Now, cover albums in general are kind of interesting because you get an insight into what the influence of musicians are, and this album is certainly no different. There are certainly quite a few bands from the 60s era British invasion on here, ranging from the Animals to the Kinks to the Beatles and even the Yardbirds, but it also has its fair share of American music of the time on showcase as well, with various covers of bands ranging from The Sweet, James Taylor, Muddy Waters, and of course The Doors. Now, the inclusion of the Beatles song Back in the USSR is a very interesting choice, as this isn't just any average Beatles song. Instead, it's a cover of a tune that is a parody of Chuck Berry's song Back in the USA, which also pokes fun at the Beach Boys. By the way, rock in peace Brian Wilson. Now I wanted to stress this point because this is being performed by a Canadian rock group who were largely influenced by the American rock and roll scene, but perhaps don't realise the irony in having chosen this song for the album. And while I can't speak for its rendition, as I'm not a huge Beatles fan, I can wager that it's not too dissimilar to the points that I've already talked about prior. This is doubled down by the fact that they also covered Steamroller Blues by James Taylor, a song that was intended to point out and ridicule inauthentic blues bands, which is exactly how I feel about Thor and their demographic of rock music when it comes to their approach. I guess there is a sense of admiration with Thor for their never say die kind of attitude that felt similar to fellow Canadian rockers Anvil. But unlike Anvil, they don't have that underdog appeal like them. In fact, they don't have much appeal going for them at all. I mean, how can you when they sound as appealing as a two-stroke lawnmower waking you up on a Sunday morning when you are hungover? They not only sound haggard, but they sound tired. And while this sounds evident on several tunes as they feel out of breath, I guess, on parts on here and there, but it also sounds like they're out of ideas, as last year's album, which was a glorified EP of new songs made into an album length by throwing B-sides and outtakes to increase its runtime, and now they're just approaching this album by doing covers. Sometimes you just have to know when to pack it in and call it a day. Considering that this band has been around for 40 years, has never really had a hit, is mostly forgotten, and is pretty flooded in search engines optimizations due to the comic book character that shares the same name, now seems like a good time to wrap it up and call a last tour. Perhaps they can drum up enough hype as one of those bands who people feel like they might have heard of back in the day, and maybe they can tour with a similar band in this predicament, like the same way that Papa Roach toured with Alien Ant Farm recently. Overall, I'm going to give this album a score of 500,000 chilies on the spicy scale, and state that the cover are largely forgettable, except for the ones mentioned above. Someone once said, shoot for the moon because if you miss, at least you land amongst the stars. Except this disregards the requirements for having enough momentum to gain the altitude required to at least exit the stratosphere for Thor. I feel like I'm watching a recent Tesla rocket launch failure, except this has been building for quite some time, I'm guessing. At least the album serves as a reminder for being a forgettable covers album, or at worst leaves a sour taste of classic songs you may remember. Either way, the end result stays the same. This is not a good album, as the album has become shortlisted for my worst records of 2025. Anyway, if you want to hear me take part on a panel where we discuss this album in depth and really hammer it home, then make sure to check out Chill Dude on the Couch and his channel and his episode of Is It That Bad for the album the same name. Anyway, listen to the album for yourself if you really want to risk that, and comment below, and as always, you stay spicy out there. If you've enjoyed this content, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to us, and stay notified for future music related content, because it keeps our manager happy at the end of the day. We are also on Discord, Instagram, Facebook, and all those other social platforms if you want to check us out. As always, people, you have a great day and stay spicy.